The warning was carved deep into the old fence post, the letters jagged as if cut by a trembling hand. Don't touch that. Most people would have taken one look and walked away. In the Wild West, warnings like that usually meant death or worse. But on that dry afternoon, under a sun that burned without mercy, Caleb Rourke rested his hand on the fence anyway. He had lost too much to be afraid of words carved into wood. In that single moment, quiet and almost invisible, would ignite a fire that consumed an entire town. Caleb had arrived in Red Hollow with nothing but a tired horse and a past he refused to speak about. The town itself looked like it was holding its breath. Buildings leaned like old men. The wind whispered through empty streets. And people watched newcomers with eyes sharpened by betrayal and survival. Red Hollow had been built on cattle and blood, and lately there had been too much of the latter. Ranches were failing. Water was scarce. Tempers were shorter than the town's patience. At the edge of Red Hollow lay a stretch of land no one claimed anymore. A dry, cracked basin surrounded by warning signs, and that one fence post with its desperate message. Folks said the land was cursed. Others said it belonged to the town's most powerful family, the Crowleys, and touching it meant starting a war you couldn't finish. Caleb didn't care about curses or families. He cared about the look in his horse's eyes, the way its ribs showed through skin, and the fact that he needed land if he was ever going to start over. Caleb had once been a respected rancher himself. Years ago, he'd owned green fields and healthy cattle, a home filled with laughter and a promise that hard work would always be enough. That promise died the night his ranch burned. A fire sparked by jealousy, by lies whispered to Isley, took everything from him. His wife didn't make it out. His young son survived, but the boy's spirit didn't. He'd buried them both in different ways and walked away from a life that had turned poisonous. Red Hollow wasn't supposed to matter. It was just another stop before he disappeared again. But something about that land called to him. Beneath the cracked earth, Caleb saw possibility. He saw a place where he could prove to himself most of all that he wasn't finished. So he touched the fence. He cut the wire. He stepped onto forbidden ground. The town erupted before sunset. Whispers spread like wildfire. At the saloon, glasses paused midair. On porches, old men spat into the dirt and shook their heads. The Crowleys wouldn't let this go. Sheriff Nolan, a man worn down by years of trying to keep peace in a place that thrived on conflict, paid Caleb a visit before dawn. He told him plainly that Red Hollow didn't need another problem. Caleb listened, nodded, and kept working. Day after day, Caleb labored alone. He dug wells that filled with nothing but hope. He repaired fencing that had been broken longer than most people could remember. The sun blistered his skin, and his hands bled, but for the first time in years, the pain felt honest. Children began to stop at a distance, curious. A few townsfolk felt something shift inside them, though they'd never admit it. Then the Crowleys came. They rode in loud and confident, dust trailing behind them like a warning of its own. Silas Crowley, broad-shouldered and cruel-eyed, dismounted and reminded Caleb who owned that land. Caleb didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for his gun. He simply said he was staying. That quiet defiance cut deeper than any insult. Silas promised consequences, and the town watched as if waiting for a hanging. Those consequences came swiftly. Caleb's well was poisoned, his horse was spooked, and ran off into the night. Someone set fire to his supply shed, a bitter echo of the past that nearly broke him. As the flames rose, Caleb fell to his knees, the memory of another fire ripping through him. For a moment, he wanted to leave, to vanish again. It would have been easier. But then a bucket of water hit the flames. Then, another. Sheriff Nolan stood beside him, jaw clenched. A woman from town followed, then two more. No one spoke. They just worked. The fire died, and in the silence that followed, Caleb realized Red Hollow was watching him not as a troublemaker anymore, but as a test. Still, the town's anger simmered. People feared the Crowleys' retaliation more than they believed in Caleb's dream. Supplies were refused. Business doors closed to him. Children were pulled away when they wandered too close. Caleb carried the weight of that isolation, like a second shadow. Yet each morning he rose before the sun and worked the land that had been declared untouchable. Weeks passed. Then one morning, water came up from the well, clear, cold, real. Caleb laughed. Sound so raw it startled the birds from the fence. Word traveled fast. Water meant life. Water meant cattle. Water meant Red Hollow. This might survive another year. That was when the town truly turned against him. The Crowley spread fear like currency, claiming Caleb was stealing water meant for everyone, that his actions would doom the rest. Meetings were held. Voices were raised. The saloon nearly became a battleground. Caleb stood alone at the center of it all, accused of greed, when all he wanted was a chance to breathe again. On the night the town decided to run him out, Caleb packed his things. Not because he was afraid, but because he was tired of fighting ghosts. He walked one last time across the land, touching the soil that had begun to soften beneath his feet. He thought of his son, of the man he used to be, and of the man he still hoped to become. Before dawn, a knock came. It was a young boy, no older than 10, clutching a note. The boy's family ranch had lost its last cow to sickness. The note was simple, written in uneven letters, thanking Caleb for the water that had saved their well downstream. That single act, unintended and unseen, had already changed lives. Caleb didn't leave. When Silas Crowley rode in again, this time he wasn't met by a lone man. The town stood behind Caleb, uncertain but present. Sheriff Nolan laid down the law. The land was unclaimed. Caleb's well had improved water flow for everyone. The Crowley's grip, built on fear and silence, finally cracked. Silas tried to draw his gun. He never got the chance. Not because someone shot him, but because no one backed him anymore. Power, it turns out, only lasts as long as people believe in it. Red Hollow changed slowly after that. Caleb didn't become a hero overnight. Trust takes time. But seasons turned, cattle returned, and the land once marked by a warning became a symbol of resilience. Caleb built a small home, not grand, but honest. He hired townsfolk. He shared water freely. And for the first time since the fire that ruined his life, he allowed himself to remember without breaking. Years later, travelers would ask about the fence post still standing at the edge of the ranch. The words were faded now, barely visible. Don't touch that, Caleb never removed it. He wanted people to see it and understand that sometimes the greatest transformations begin with a warning and the courage to face it anyway. Caleb Rourke didn't just reclaim land, he reclaimed himself. He taught a broken town that fear only wins when no one challenges it. That redemption isn't about erasing the past, but standing tall in spite of it. His story spread far beyond Red Hollow, not because of violence or legend, but because it reminded people of something simple and powerful. One person's quiet determination can change everything, and if this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you that growth often lies on the other side of fear, take a moment to show your support. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and keep these stories alive. Because somewhere out there, someone is staring at a warning, wondering if they're strong enough to touch the thing they've been told to avoid.